The pictures and/or illustrations in this presentation are originals. They have been generated by Lexica Aperture, either version 3.5 or version 4.0. DALL-E E2 and AI Bing, which uses artificial intelligence, has also been used to create realistic images and art from a description in a natural language. Those mysterious UFOs and the Bible. These are also referred to as UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. That's the new technology that they're using today. In this world of fast-moving lifestyles and supersonic flight, atomic submarines, it seems natural that man would turn his attention to one of the final frontiers, space. Why? Well, over the years, history has proven that mankind cannot solve many of its pressing problems. If anything, he adds to them. So, by looking into space, man hopes to find answers and help before it is too late. One might ask, what answers and help in what way as we look into outer space? Well, answers to questions such as, where did we come from? Why are we here on the earth? What is the purpose of life? And will help come to unite mankind in peace before he destroys himself and the earth? Naturally, since modern man thinks he's so intelligent, belief in an all-powerful, all-knowing, invisible creator is hard to comprehend, because he says, I've got this great idea. So accordingly, then, to academia, the obvious thing to do is to receive help soon by some super-advanced alien beings on some far-off, benevolent galaxy. It would have to be benevolent. So, ever since the year 1947, with sightings of the first acknowledged UFO, man thinks that beings from outer space have finally turned their attention to this lost entire generation. But are the things as they say? Are we being visited by spacemen? Listen to this quote taken from a TV Guide article, They Fly in the Face of Logic, by Dick Russell. He says, and I quote, to date, there has been thousands of these sightings. So according to various ufologists, help has finally arrived again. Chariots of the God is what many UFO followers call them. Literally hundreds of thousands of books have been printed on this very subject. Many of these authors would have us believe, in some instances, maybe in many or perhaps all, these things were controlled by ancient astronauts. They say that throughout time, these space travelers have helped stupid, ignorant man with many of his pressing problems. Now, Dr. Krupp, the director of the Griffith Observatory, has something very interesting to say, and I'd like to read that to you. He says, usually false scholarship and wild speculation are no more than harmless entertainment, but ufologists' popularity has permitted them a vast joke at the expense of the true scholars who do the hard work in the fields, laboratories, and libraries that is necessary to accurately piece together the past. Worse still, many ufologists obscure the real knowledge we have of ancient people at a time when archaeology is coming of an age and applying sophisticated quantitative techniques from the physical sciences. It seems that most believers in ufology believe that man evolved instead of being created. And of course, if he's this evolved caveman, who is obviously stupid, naturally they need help to construct all those ancient wonders of the old world. Number one, ancient people, according to the ufologists, were primitive and not advanced technologically. Number two, but the ancient people really were advanced, and then the ufologists cite evidence of this advancement in technology, such as, the pyramids, invention of fire, this, that, the other, all the many wonders of the world. And number three, but since, they say, they really weren't advanced, ancient people must have received their knowledge or their know-how from extraterrestrial visitors or space. They had to have help. However, it's obvious that these people believe in evolution. not creation, such as presented by Charles Darwin. Also, I'd like to mention to you that, Charles Darwin only spent 2 years in medical school, and then he didn't graduate. He left before he got his degree. And you're basing your life, in many cases, on information from someone such as this. However, according to the Bible, man was created perfect and with enough intellectual capacity that at one point God was very concerned about human speedy technological advancement. Follow along as I read Genesis 11, 1 through 8 in the Living Bible. At that time, all mankind spoke a single language. As the population grew and spread eastward, a plain was discovered in the land of Babylon and was soon thickly populated. The people who lived there began to talk about building a great city with a temple tower reaching into the skies, a proud eternal monument for themselves. This will wield us together, they said, and keep us from scattering all over the world. So they made great piles of hard-burnt brick and collected bitumen to use as mortar. But when God came down to see the city and the tower that mankind was making, he said, "Look, if they are able to accomplish all of this when they have just begun to exploit their linguistic and political unity, just think of what they will do later. Nothing will be unattainable for them. Come, let's go down and give them different languages so that they won't understand each other's words." So in that way, God scattered them all over the earth, and that ended the building of that city. So, according to the Bible, man did not need help from ancient astronauts. In fact, God slowed man's progress at the Tower of Babel by confusing their language. From Babylon, people spread throughout the world and took with them all the technology used to build that original tower. However, this knowledge was now in their newly gained language. Realizing this, we can now see that ancient man could build amazing structures, such as the pyramids, without the help of spacemen. According to Bible history, the Egyptian pyramids were built long after the Tower of Babel. Why do I mention the pyramids? Many ufologists believe that the pyramids were built with such precision that man needed help from technologically advanced space travelers to construct them. But archaeological digs have proven that there are definite methods in which the Egyptians were able to build these tremendous structures. However, I would like you to consider the following information taken from the documentary on Ancient Egypt, Top 7 Pyramids, dated 2021. We're going to discuss the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid of Pharaoh Sneferu. Notice the Bent Pyramid seems to be falling apart, where the Red Pyramid seems to be a lot more stable, both built by the same pharaoh. Each of these are located just a few kilometers or miles from each other, as you can see illustrated here. Bent Pyramid on the bottom and the Red Pyramid on the top. The distance, however, changed everything, as the Bent Pyramid was built on gravel and sand, while the Red Pyramid was constructed on more solid stone foundations. Additionally, the stones of the Bent Pyramid were stacked on a 15-degree slope, whereas the Red Pyramid was constructed with a broader base and used horizontal coursing of the bricks, which made the structure much sturdier and perfect in appearance. Albert Einstein said it this way: "To raise new questions, new possibilities, to regard old problems from a new angle, requires creative imagination and marks real advancement in science." So the Egyptian builders figured it all out by themselves, and outer space aliens weren't needed to help them do so. Well, it would be good to see another example of man's ancient technology, so as to prove that mankind is extremely ingenious and doesn't need ancient astronauts to direct building efforts here on the Earth. Have you ever heard of the Minoan Mycenaean Empire? No? According to National Geographic, this empire was extremely advanced. Various encyclopedias said this empire had flushing toilets and running water. Note the way the homes were built. Some homes were seen where clay pipes were coming out of the walls, which actually carried waste to the ground. Yes, into something called sewer pits. This pit was joined by other pipes from adjacent buildings. Imagine indoor plumbing way back in 1700 BCE, and on the second floor, no less. This middle Minoan period covered 2100 BCE to 1600 BCE. This is 3,900 years ago. I guess they didn't need astronaut plumbers to help them out. It was necessity. Yes, necessity which made the difference. One of the ufologists' most compelling arguments for the existence of ancient astronauts is the biblical account of the so-called UFO seen by Ezekiel the prophet. To ufologists, this biblical description of the vision of Ezekiel was a detailed account of a spacecraft landing in 600 BCE, and they say it proves their point that UFOs have existed for years, and if the Bible speaks about them, they must exist, right? Well, Mr. Blumridge, former chief of the Systems Layout Branch of NASA, in his book The Spaceships of Ezekiel, analyzes Ezekiel's statements and indicates that a plausible spacelander could be deduced from the reading of the scriptures. He illustrates this point by a detailed rendering of the spacecraft. Actually, it's quite attractive, isn't it? Blumridge's case is interesting because he appears to analyze the problem from both the technical and the textual side, but it is flawed by an incomplete understanding of the Bible text and Hebrew words. Let us examine this by considering Ezekiel's biblical vision. To set the scene, Ezekiel was by one of the canals of ancient Babylon when he first got a glimpse of this so-called spacecraft. In examining closely Ezekiel's sightings, we will find that he used the term vision to describe the happening. So let's look at Ezekiel 1, verse 1, and read it. Now it came about in the 13th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, while I, Ezekiel, was in the midst of the exiled people by the river Shebar, that the heavens were opened, and I began to see visions of God. Visions. What do we know about that term? Let's take a look. Well, in Hebrew, the term vision is mara, and it actually means vision. Take a look there. Translation. Vision. In the visions. Because of the vision. It's a vision. It's not a real thing. So let's look in the Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary under vision, and we'll consider the 2A part, which seems to be more appropriate. Something seen in a dream, a trance, or ecstasy, especially a supernatural appearance that conveys a revelation. B, a thought, concept, or object formed by the manifestation. C, a manifestation to the senses of something immaterial. A vision. Obviously, Ezekiel knew what he saw, and to him it was not a UFO or a flying saucer. But what did he see in his mind? It was a privileged look into God's invisible world presented to him by the hand or applied power of Jehovah God, which could only be described as a vision. But for clarification, let's examine the account further. Ezekiel 1, 4 through 6 and 10 tells us this. And I looked, and behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, a great cloud with a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness round about it, and out of the midst thereof, as it were, glowing metal, and out of the midst of the fire. And out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and every one of them had 4 faces, and every one of them had 4 wings. As for the likeness of their faces, they had the face of a man, and the 4 had the face of a lion on the right side, and the 4 had the face of a bull on the left side. The 4 also had the face of an eagle. American Standard Version. This description is a verbal expression of Jehovah's heavenly invisible organization, truly a privilege to know about. We must always keep in mind that God's kingdom is invisible, and if we as humans are to understand something invisible, we need a physical representation described for us so that we can understand it. God, who is of a higher intelligence, knows that humans need things described in physical terms, so he gave Ezekiel that vision. Now, did you notice in the account the mention of faces? Mr. Blumrich's claim is that the landing legs with the fairings and flanges would have given such an appearance. Faces? Flanges look like faces? That's a stretch. However, an examination of the Bible would point out to any true student of the Bible that these faces were representative of something, yes, something more than landing legs of a spacecraft. Now, what would that be? It would be the four qualities or attributes of God himself. For instance, the eagle represents heavenly wisdom based on Job 35:11b, where it says, "And he makes us wiser than the birds of the heaven." And then the lion, righteousness, justice, Hosea 5:14a, "For I will be like a young bull in Ephraim, and like a strong lion to the house of Judah." Then we have the bull, which is unlimited power and strength, Psalms 92:10. "But you will exalt my strength like that of a wild bull." And then finally, man, representing loyal, loving kindness, as brought to our attention at Proverbs 19:22a, where it says, "The desirable thing in a man is his loyal love." These four attributes are in perfect balance with one another, which would differentiate Jehovah from all other gods of mythology or false religion. Jehovah has gifted his angels and earthly man with a suitable measure of these attributes, and thus it can be said, as it was at Genesis 1:26, that man was made in the image of God by qualities, not by appearance. But how do we know that these faces are not Ezekiel's way of describing landing legs of a spacecraft? Well, for one thing, these faces are found on angels or cherubic living creatures seen about 700 years later by the Apostle John, where he sees them in a vision located around the permanent throne of God in heaven. This is recorded for us in Revelation 4:6-7. "And before the throne, as it were, a sea of glass like a crystal, and in the midst of the throne, and around about the throne, 4 living creatures full of eyes before and behind. And the first creature was like a lion, and the second creature like a calf, and the third creature had the face of a man, and the fourth creature was like a flying eagle." These verses clarify once again that these faces represent something. What was that? The 4 qualities or attributes of God. Do not get lost now. We must keep in mind that we are using verbal expressions to describe God's invisible heavenly organization, and not some metallic alien flying saucer as ufologists would have us believe. Now, obviously, it can never be as impressive to us as it must have been to the prophet Ezekiel. However, his inspired description no doubt deepens our appreciation for God and his heavenly invisible realm, does it not? Now, after this discussion of Ezekiel's vision, I'm sure that you realize a few things. Number 1, Ezekiel's sighting was a vision, not an actual happening, and symbolic language was used to describe that vision. 2, Ezekiel knew what he was viewing, and it was not unidentified to them, otherwise he would have asked. He knew it was a representation of God's heavenly kingdom. And 3, God, being all-powerful and all-knowing, does not need a 4-wheeled chariot or vehicle to ride around the universe on. Now, with that settled, let's return to the present. What about UFO sightings today? People really see strange things in the sky. What are they? What do they actually see? Well, even various magazines ask, are they really here? Well, one might ask, how many cases are yet unsolved in these UFO encounters? Well, for more than 30 years, ever since the first wave of UFO reports in 1947, Pentagon generals, Kansas farmers have been puzzled by that very question. UFOs have appeared in the form of discs and donuts, spheres and cigars. According to a Gallup poll released in 1974, 15 million Americans believe that they've seen one or more UFOs whisking across the sky. They include numerous astronauts and even President Jimmy Carter, who says that while governor of Georgia, he saw a glowing light that changed colors and then grew luminous as it whizzed past him. That other world, according to the late psychologist C.G. Jung, may be no more than a subconscious manifestation of people's need to imagine something better, such as intervention by heavenly powers in a dark time for humanity. Another student of the subject, Philip J. Klass, senior avionics editor of Aviation Week and Space Technology, states, after 12 years of investigating some of the most famous UFO reports, I am convinced that all UFO reports have prosaic terrestrial explanations, or earthly terms to explain them. Philip Klass, November 8, 1919 to August 9, 2005, was an American journalist and a UFO researcher. He was known for his skepticism regarding UFOs. In the ufological and skeptical communities, Klass inspired polarized appraisals. He has been called the Sherlock Holmes of ufology. One might ask, how many cases are yet unsolved? Well, let's look at some UFO encounters and just see what we have here. The Condon report discussed 95 cases. 70 were identified. 20% were unidentified. And this was in the year 1969. New West Magazine, November 77, said that 70% were identified. 20%, once again, were unidentified. And this was in the year 1977. But according to R. Schiller, author of 3 UFOs, How Real Are They? Reader's Digest, 95% proved to be identified. 5% were unidentified. This too is 1977. And world news organizations also said 95% were identified and 5% were unidentified. This was 2019. So, to be fair, then, between 5 and 20% are really unidentified. However, does that automatically make them flying saucers, let alone from outer space? Listen to reporter Mike Wall. He says this: UFOs are real, but don't assume they're alien spaceships. Mike Wall, May 31st, 2019. Aliens shouldn't be the default explanation for weird stuff in the sky. He goes on to say UFOs are very real, but that doesn't mean that ET has been violating our airspace. But what of the Bible? Does it totally discount life in outer space? No, absolutely not. It makes no mention of other organic life forms. However, it does speak of spiritual life in abundance. At Revelation 5:11, the Bible says, "And I saw, and I heard a voice of many angels around the throne, and the living creatures, and the elders, and the number of them was myriads of myriads, and thousands of thousands." Literally, this would mean that hundreds of millions of angels exist in heaven. Yes, they exist in the cosmos. We are not alone. There are hundreds of millions of them. Have the angels ever visited the earth before? Yes. Let us read Genesis 6:1 through 5. Now when men began to multiply over all the world, and had daughters born to them, the angels noticed that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any one of them that they had chosen. So the Eternal, or God, said, "Human creatures are but flesh. My spirit is not to be immortal in them. They shall not live more than 120 years. It was in these days that the Nephilim giants arose on earth, as well as afterwards whenever angels had intercourse with the daughters of men and had children born to them. These were the heroes who were famous in the days of old. When the Eternal, or God, saw that the wickedness of man on earth was great, and that man's mind was never bent on anything but evil, the Eternal was sorry." Was this visit sanctioned by God? No, it was not. Take a look at Jude 6 and read that with me, starting here. "And the angels that did not keep their original position, but forsook their own proper dwelling place, he, God, has reserved with eternal bonds under dense darkness for the judgment of the great day." As every avid Bible student knows, angels are a higher creation than man. And at 2 Kings 19:35, it shows the power the angels individually possessed, where it says this, "And that night Jehovah's angel went out and killed 185,000 men in the Assyrian camp. The first thing in the morning, they were all found dead corpses." Byington translation. Does it seem logical to you that if angels, who have more power and intelligence than mortal man, became corrupt by visitations to earth, then other life forms, if they existed, would also be influenced by sinful and imperfect man? Well, logically speaking, God would not allow this type of association either, would he? Truly, the principle at 1 Corinthians 15:33 would definitely apply from the contemporary English version. Don't fool yourselves. Bad friends will destroy you. So then, based on this principle and everything that we've discussed up to this point, the creator of all that exists would not logically allow any earthly visitation by other extraterrestrial beings if they existed in the first place. But wait a minute. Many of these sightings have been documented, and the participants have undergone hypnosis and lie detector tests just to prove that they exist. Well, true as that may be, does it prove beyond a doubt the existence of space visitors? Well, listen to what William McCall, an MD, has to say about this. William McCall, MD, a former president of the American Institute of Hypnosis, who has used the technique, hypnosis, in 30 UFO cases, notes, "It is theoretically possible for the skilled hypnotist to make a person say or do anything under hypnosis when it comes to regression. This is because the patient is acutely aware of the hypnotist's inflections, words, and body language. Since his primary desire is to please the hypnotist, he will often say things that are perhaps not completely true, but may be tainted by his fantasies. I do believe that the abductees, those taken by spacecraft, are unable to separate fact from subconscious fantasy." So then, since 5 to 20% of UFO sightings are unidentified, what do these people see? Well, psychiatrists have said that many of these people are telling the truth when it says it happened. But it is their own truth, and on the level of objective reality, it did not happen. In researching the subject, there are two additional terms that could apply here. And what are they? Synchronism. This is a condition in which the brain tries to produce an answer for a situation that is not totally understood by the brain, even if the answer is not logical. And the second one, autokinetic illusion. This is a self-induced answer that the mind makes up for something that it does not understand or comprehend. In other words, if you don't understand what you're seeing, the mind still wants an answer, so it makes something up. Well, let's look at a few examples of this. How about this? What are you looking at? Well, this is a man's face looking directly at you. At least wait a minute. He's looking away from you. That's his right eye. He's looking, and you see the earring, and wait a minute, it's changed again. Now he's looking straight at me. No, he's looking away from me. Do you see? Your mind is trying to give you an answer for something that doesn't really seem to make sense. What about this? Well, here's a child that's on a plexiglass piece of plastic, very thick, so it won't hurt itself, won't fall through. And it's looking down at its parents, and it's actually going crazy because it doesn't understand what's happening. The mind is trying to tell the child what's going on, but it doesn't understand what it's looking at. How about this? Whoa, here's a zebra. Wait a minute, two zebras with one head? No, can't be. Do you get the picture? Or this. This is a man or a woman, can't tell really, with a llama's head. Or is it a llama with a man's body or a woman's body? We can't tell. It can't possibly be either one. But look at it. Your mind's trying to tell you what it's looking at. Which one of these two circles in the center, here and here, is larger? This one here seems to be the larger one, but is it really? Take a look at that. Here we go. Bing, 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 bing. It's the same size. But there are circumstances surrounding both of these objects that give the appearance of them being something that they're not. Get the picture of what we're saying here? I think so. Then we have clouds. Or this, what is that? Hot air balloon. Another one. Now, if you saw these from a distance, what would your mind tell you? Especially if you couldn't see the basket at the bottom. It's trying to tell you, wait a minute, are these flying saucers? What are these things? I got a picture, I got to tell you, of a flying saucer. I mean, take a look at that. Here's the light coming from inside of the capsule, and this is the exhaust. And it's going this direction, right? Well, I'm telling you, that's pretty special. You don't get those too often. But what is it really? These pesky UFOs might be glowing, humming objects that are insects. That's right. Insects. Unbelievable. We are confronted with unusual sights each and every day of our lives. Could there be another explanation? Listen to what J.A. Hynek, astronomer, professor, and renowned ufologist, said. The only thing I'm sure of is that there is an intelligence connected with this. I don't know whether this intelligence is from very far off or whether it is metaterrestrial, near us in the same way that TV pictures are right now passing through this room, or whether it will finally turn out to be some inner space, some strange manifestation of our own psychic energy. It could be coming from a parallel dimension or a reality that's much closer than we could possibly imagine. Bible students realize that there are powerful forces in dark places that have influenced man over the ages. What forces are we speaking about? 1 John 5:19 says, "But the whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one." Satan and his demons. Yes, Satan has appeared as an angel of light, according to the scriptures. Now, this might seem a bit naive to many individuals, but Jesus even acknowledged Satan's existence. For instance, when he was tempted 3 times in the wilderness, Jesus did not say, "Well, go away, Satan, because I know you don't exist. You're just in my imagination." Jesus knew that Satan was real and that he could exert power over man and earthly elements. But what kind of power does Satan have at his disposal? Job chapter 1 tells us. Job 1, 6-7 says, "Now the day came when the sons, or the angels of the true God, entered to take their station before Jehovah. And Satan also entered among them. Then Jehovah said to Satan, 'Where have you come from?' Satan answered Jehovah, 'From roving about on the earth and from walking about in it.'" In this meeting, what did God allow Satan to do? God granted Satan permission to test Job, a faithful man here on earth, and he did it this way. 1. Satan strikes quickly against Job. Then he causes a raiding party of Sabaeans to take off with Job's 1,000 oxen and 500 she-asses, killing all their attendants except one who told Job what happened. 2. Satan sends a fire from heaven to consume Job's 7,000 sheep along with their attendants, sparing only one of these men, to once again tell Job what happened. 3. Satan causes 3 bands of Chaldeans to take off with Job's 3,000 camels, killing all but one of the attendants. 4. Satan sends a great wind that strikes the house where Job's 10 children are feasting, and they all died. Finally, Satan went out from the presence of God and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And this is recorded for us at Job 1, 12-18 and 2:7. Just to reiterate, Satan has the power to 1. Plant thoughts and ideas in the minds of men. The Sabaeans and the Chaldeans thought it was their idea to rob and plunder Job. 2. Satan has the power to manipulate the elements of the earth, such as lightning, fire, and wind. 3. He can cause sicknesses. Satan inflicted Job with a malignant boil from his head to his toe. Let me share an additional example of Satan's abilities. Recall the Bible story of the Star of Bethlehem? This star led the astrologers, or the Magi, to the enemy of Jesus who wanted to kill him. And this was King Herod. Take a look with me at Matthew 2, 1 through 4, and let's read this together. And after Jesus was born at Bethlehem in Judea, in the days of Herod the king, lo, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, Where is the King of the Jews that has been born? For we saw his star coming up and have come to do him reverence. And at hearing it, King Herod was alarmed, and all Jerusalem with him. And he called together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, and inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. Matthew 2, 7 through 9. Then Herod called the Magi privately and got from them the precise time of the star's appearance, and sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and learn the precise facts about the child, and when you find him, bring word to me, so that I may come myself and do him reverence. And they listened to the king and went. And lo, the star that they had seen coming up went ahead of them, until it came and stood still over where the child was. Matthew 2:12. And it being revealed to them in a dream that they should not go back to Herod, they withdrew to their own country by another route. So the plot was foiled by God when he sent the Magi home, bypassing King Herod, who was a mortal enemy of Jesus. What was the result? Well, it was recorded for us in Matthew 16, where it says, Then Herod was greatly enraged at seeing that he had been made a fool of by the Magi, and he sent and took the lives of all the boys in Bethlehem and in all its territory from 2 years old down, to correspond to the precise time which he had gotten from the Magi. You know what, though? This story exposes something very interesting that no doubt Satan would like to keep a secret, keep it from everybody. Well, what's that? The star that the astrologers and Magi saw was a UFO or a UAP, but not a flying saucer, an unidentified flying object under Satan's control. Obviously, the evidence points out that if Satan can and did influence the minds and actions of ancient men, then he can and does influence the minds of people today, even to the point of seeing unidentified flying objects in the sky to try to mislead them. But the question is, why would Satan do such a thing? Because he wants all of mankind to turn from serving God or even believing in God to look somewhere else to be saved. It's not complicated at all. Let's start at the Garden of Eden, because that's really where it all happened. We'll look at Genesis 3:6. Genesis 3:6 says, Consequently the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was something desirable to the eyes. Yes, the tree was pleasing to look at, so she began taking of its fruit and eating it. Afterward, she also gave some to her husband when he was with her, and because of that, this resulted. Genesis 3:23-24. Notice what it says here. With that, Jehovah God expelled him, Adam, and his wife, Eve, from the Garden of Eden to cultivate the ground from which he had been taken. So God drove the man out, and he posted at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubs and the flaming blade of a sword that was turning continuously to guard the way to the tree of life. Result, paradise lost. Even though Adam and Eve had rebelled against God and sinned by eating the forbidden fruit, the Creator knew that not all of their offspring would follow that same course. Many would serve God through all the tests of faith that the devil could throw at him, such as we have discussed today, Job being a fine example. Thus, by not falling for these deceptive acts of the devil, we are, in a small way, vindicating God's name and proving the devil a liar. Perhaps we have given you something to think about. Perhaps not. But remember that these so-called UFOs should not sway us from belief in God and hope in his earthly paradise. Keep 2 Peter 3:13 in mind, where it says, But there are new heavens and a new earth that we are waiting according to his promise, and in these righteousness is to dwell. Therefore, people do not need to look to outer space for any kind of help. Because of this. God will rescue us from all the misery, affliction, and disaster this earth is now experiencing a promise of Revelation 21, 3 through 5. And also Titus 1, 2 tells us, and all these things are based on a hope of the everlasting life that God, who cannot lie, promised long ago. In summary, what really are UFOs? They could be uncontrolled natural phenomena, such as balloons, gas or clouds, even bugs. Yeah, remember? Could be other unknown natural events that we're not aware of. Do we know absolutely everything that takes place in the universe and understand what it means? Then there's autokinetic or synchronistic illusions, either on a mass scale, seen by many, or privately, seen individually. And then we have satanic influence, who is able to control natural elements of the earth and able to control the thoughts of the actions. Although unidentified flying objects do exist, from all the information thus covered, it seems very unlikely that UFOs are flying saucers from outer space, or for that matter, from anywhere beyond the Earth.